Only in Kentucky could one county be torn apart by feuds, and for other reasons reinvented itself 2 centuries later as the City of Hope. Hi, I'm Michael. I want to teach you a little bit more about Kentucky, one county at a time, all 120 of them. And today we're talking about Clay County. Clay County, formed in 1807, was named for General Green Clay, a wealthy landowner and War of 1812 officer, and also one of early Kentucky's most influential political figures. His family connections stretched across the state, and his landholdings shaped entire regions. The county seat, Manchester, formed soon after the county was formed, tucked into the valleys carved by Goose Creek and its tributaries. But Clay County's origins run deeper than statehood. They begin at the Goose Creek Salt Works, one of the most important salt-producing sites in early Kentucky history. And I've mentioned before in previous videos how salt was just so essential on the frontier. It preserved food, supported livestock, and kept communities alive. The Langford Goose Creek Salt Works was so valuable that the legislature funded roads to reach it before the county even existed. And when Clay County was officially formed, the government had no courthouse there, by the way, so officials met in Robert Baker's log cabin at the salt works. And for a time, that small salt-making settlement functioned as the county's first seat of government. The salt works sat at a ford where the old Warrior's Path, a Native American travel route, crossed Goose Creek. This crossing point is often considered one of the most historically layered spots in southeastern Kentucky. It's a place where indigenous routes, pioneer survival, and county formation overlap. Today, the site is preserved as the Pioneer Village, complete with reconstructed cabins and interpretive panels, including the Jesse Cotton Cabin, which represents one of the earliest structures tied to county government there. The Civil War ended Clay County's salt era. Confederate forces raided the works in 1861 and hauled off hundreds of barrels. In 1862, Union General Don Carlos Buell destroyed the salt works so they couldn't resupply Confederate armies. Even Colonel Girard, who owned the salt works and fought for the Union, accepted the loss of the salt works as necessary for the war effort. Clay County's early story also centers on the legend of Chief Redbird, whose name still marks the Redbird River and the surrounding community. In the late 1790s, Redbird and a companion known as Will lived along the river, hunting and interacting peacefully with early settlers. Local tradition portrays Redbird as a protector who warned pioneers of danger. His death in ambush around 1796 or 1797 became one of the county's foundational stories. His body was placed in a rock shelter that contains ancient carvings, now called the Redbird petroglyphs, and whether viewed as legend or history, the story remains one of Clay County's most repeated and defining early narratives. Then there's Burning Springs, named for a very literal reason. In the 1800s, natural gas steeped from the ground here. When ignited, flames rose from the earth itself, and travelers wrote about the eerie sight of burning ground in the Appalachian woods. It's one of Kentucky's earliest documented natural gas phenomena, and the name has stuck for more than 200 years. Clay County's waterways shaped its early settlement patterns as well. Goose Creek, the Redbird River, and the South Fork of the Kentucky River carved out narrow valleys where families built farms, schools, and churches. Communities formed wherever the land allowed it, of course, and a place called Oneida sits where the three major streams meet, which is, again, Goose Creek, Redbird River, and Bullskin Creek, making it a natural gathering point long before it became home to a school. But the county's most infamous chapter began in the late 1800s when Clay County became known nationwide for the Baker-Howard feud, sometimes referred to as the Clay County War. What began in 1898 as a personal dispute involving Bad Tom Baker drew into one of the deadliest family feuds in American history. Ambushes along creek roads, courthouse shootouts, retaliatory killings. The Baker Howards and the Girards were also drawn into a cycle of violence that newspaper printed across the country. Manchester, with its early grid centered around the courthouse square, became the front line. Violence escalated so severely that the governor of Kentucky at the time sent the Kentucky State Militia to occupy the town multiple times. Soldiers patrolled the streets, set up tents downtown, and even mounted a Gatling gun near the courthouse, just in case. The most shocking moment came in 1899 when Tom Baker was assassinated by a sniper inside the militia camp under state protection. His death pushed the conflict into national headlines and exposed just how deeply the feud had penetrated county life. The feud finally began to wind down when leaders of the Baker and Howard families met on the courthouse steps in Manchester and publicly shook hands before a large crowd. Of course, the truce didn't erase the history, but it did end the chapter that had defined the county for years. And so people were very happy and welcome to see that truce. But at the same time, one of Clay County's most enduring institutions was taking root. James Anderson Burns, a local teacher who grew up amid that violence of the family feud, believed the county needed a new way forward. In 1899, he founded the Oneida Baptist Institute, choosing Oneida's central location where multiple creeks and communities converged. Burns brought students from feuding families together in the same classrooms, convinced that shared education could end generations of conflict. Members of the Baker, Howard, White, and Gerard families helped construct the first buildings. Classes opened in 1900 with 125 students, and the school's influence helped keep the next generation out of the feud cycle. Oneida remains one of Kentucky's oldest and most respected mountain boarding schools. Other communities deserve some mention too, of course, because around that same time, they made their own name. Foggertown, named for the thick fog settling in the creek bottom, was once a stop for an old stage route. Horse Creek became known in the 19th century as a Methodist camp meetings that drew families from across the mountains. Goose Rock took its name from a rock outcrop that early settlers swore looked like a goose's neck. Big Creek, Bright Shade, and Greenbrier developed around small farms, schools, and general stores, which was the typical pattern of Appalachian settlement, where all you needed was a church, schoolhouse, and a stream to define a community. And as the 20th century progressed, economic hardship shaped daily life. Coal mining existed in Clay County, but never to the level seen in the surrounding counties in Kentucky. Many families relied on timber work, farming, and seasonal employment, and census records from the late 1900s consistently ranked Clay County among the poorest counties in the United States, with median household incomes and poverty rates far outside national averages. Clay County's most influential political figure was Bert T. Combs, born in Foggertown in 1911. Combs grew up in a farming family, served in the Army Air Forces during World War II, and worked his way into public service as a judge before becoming Kentucky's governor from 1959 to 1963. In office, he pushed through one of the largest education funding expansions in state history, launched a major school construction program, tightened ethics rules, and really modernized the state's hiring and budgeting systems. After leaving office, Combs returned to law and played a central role in the Rose v. Council for Better Education case, which led to Kentucky's major school reform overhaul in 1990. When the Daniel Boone Parkway opened, Clay County finally had a fast, reliable connection through the mountains. But the toll booths at the time became a long-running frustration. Locals paid daily, while other parts of Kentucky enjoyed free highways. And so the push to remove the tolls turned into a regional cause. When the tolls were finally marked a meaningful shift, and that shift was that Clay County felt less isolated, more connected, and more aligned with the rest of the state. And today, Daniel Boone Parkway is named Hal Rogers Parkway. And then came the moment that redefined modern Clay County. On May 2nd, 2004, roughly 3,500 residents, an enormous share of the county, marched through downtown Manchester in the March Against Drugs. Led by 63 local churches, the event was a public rejection of the opioid crisis, corruption, and the hopelessness that had taken a hold. The march sparked investigations, arrests, new partnerships, and a wave of community rebuilding. Manchester, as a result, adopted a new identity: the City of Hope. So, that's Clay County. What'd I get wrong this time?